I'm Dave Palumbo, founder of Species Nutrition. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work and are backed by science. From my earliest bodybuilding days, I believed in only putting the best in my body, and that lives on in the Species Nutrition line of products. We use only top-of-the-line formulations dosed for maximum results and the best flavoring systems available. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
All right, and welcome to another episode of RXMuscle Live. I am your host today, Anthony Pasquale, and I am going to be interviewing Dave Palumbo. Dave, how are you?
I feel like inadequate. I'm not in the driver's seat for once, and we thought this would be a good kind of flip it around type of thing, because you like to ask questions. You got a lot of questions, and I have answers, and sometimes I don't get to give my answers, so this will be kind of cool.
Yeah, and just for everyone that's going to be watching this and listening to this, Dave does not know what questions I'm going to be asking. He has not had any chance to prepare or anything like that, so he's going to be hitting these live fire and everything like that. So it's as real and raw as you can get it.
Yeah. You know, I always tell people, whenever I do interviews, I'm like, don't send me the questions. I don't want to think about the questions before. I want to just spontaneously answer. So sometimes that's dangerous, but a lot of times you get a more honest answer that way, you know?
Yep, I agree. All right, so you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. First question I have for you, I've always wanted to know this is, because you help so many people with diets, and you know people, they overeat with cheat meals. Have you ever had situations in your life where you ate too much food in a cheat meal and actually got sick?
Yeah. Well, before I got into bodybuilding, believe it or not, and I was a runner, I used to starve myself like a good majority of the day. I'd have like little small like tuna and some salads and stuff like that, because I was trying to keep my weight down and even lowered it, initially, because I thought I'd be a better runner. And then I would gorge like at night, like I was a completely dysfunctional eater, borderline definite eating disorder behavior. When I got into bodybuilding, the multiple meals per day kind of stopped that binging behavior, because I wasn't hungry all the time. So, but when I would diet for a show, a lot of times, I would every once a week I'd always go and have a cheat meal. And my cheat meal back in the 90s, a lot of times, was going to Manhattan from Long Island, and I would go eat all you can eat sushi, because that was the only place you can get like unlimited sushi. And if I had to pay for it, it would have cost me hundreds of dollars, for the meal. So I would go there. It was literally, I think, $20 or $25 or something like that. And we would go every single week, either Friday or Saturday night, and I would meet all these bodybuilders there. So in 1996, I had helped this girl do the Junior USA down in Myrtle Beach, and she won the show, won the overall. The girl, Donna Restivo, who's now Donna Sterling. And I was supposed to cheat, and I said, you know what? I don't want to cheat at one of these cheap buffets here in Myrtle Beach. I'll wait till I get home on Sunday, and then I'll drive to the city, and I'll do my cheat meal. So I did that. I was starving all weekend because everyone was eating buffets and junk food, and I was dieting through this whole thing. And I got home, and we drove to the city. I got there probably 6 to 7 o'clock at night. On a Sunday night, I went right into the buffet. It wasn't a buffet, it was like a sit-down place, but you can order as much as you want. And I literally probably ate, I swear to you, I swear I probably ate at least 40 pieces of sushi, and I probably had, I don't know how many rolls it was, but each roll is like 6 pieces. I probably had at least 200 pieces, okay? No joke. I'm not some people exaggerate, I'm not exaggerating it. This stuff was, I stopped eating because it was at my throat. My brain was still hungry, but I literally couldn't get another piece down my throat. And next door to the place, they had this yogurt place that had my picture on the wall, because I used to go in there after the sushi place, and we would get yogurt. And I went in there and I had a yogurt, and I should never have done that, because it was like the ice cream yogurt type stuff. Back then it was sugar-free, fat-free, all that crazy stuff. And I'm like, I should never have had it, because I really didn't have any room for it. And I couldn't get into my car. Now remember, I was 300, I probably was like 290 because I was dieting, and my stomach was like out to here. And I couldn't get behind the wheel to drive home, so I had to walk around the block a few times to try to that's how full I was. I really probably should have just thrown this stuff up, but I refused to. I got in the car and I started driving home. Now, my sister lived in Queens at the time, which was about halfway between the city and Long Island where I lived. I stopped at her house and I called her up. Well, actually, I don't even know if I had a cell phone back then, but probably. And I said, she's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, I got to get on your, because I had a life cycle and I had given it to her when she moved out of the house because I knew she was into cardio and she was competing and I really didn't do that much cardio. So I said, I got to get on the life cycle. She's like, it's like 11 o'clock on a Sunday. She's like, I'm going to work tomorrow. She's like, if you want. I got on that thing for like an hour straight because I felt so sick. I was like, you know when you gag in your mouth and the food is literally, the sushi rolls were in my mouth still. Yeah. And it was, after that I said never again. It was funny because it really wasn't junk food. It was just so much volume because I was so psychotically hungry that I never did that again. It was the most uncomfortable feeling. I'm afraid to even know what my blood sugars probably were that whole night, you know, with all that food that was constant. It probably took 18 hours to digest that meal, I have to imagine.
Yeah, I'm assuming you didn't eat much the next day, right?
No, the next morning I was starved again. Because it wasn't like it was dirty food, it was just too much it was too much food. No human being could have eaten that much food. You know those guys that do those eating contests where they eat like 50 hot dogs, you know, in 2 minutes? I don't think that they ate as much food as I did. Now, I didn't do it in 5 minutes. It took me 2 hours to eat it, but I think I consumed more food in that time period, yeah.
Holy cow. Well, I've been listening to you for 15 years. I never heard that story before.
Yeah, so that's a good story. What was your craziest?
I know really is sexy, but I will say the one time I got mangled was the thing that gets me is fondue. I went to a wedding once with those chocolate fondues and that stuff. If I have any of that sweet chocolate, I'm mangled. You know,
it's not that it's the volume of it. It's just you just get sick because it's too much sugar and stuff like that.
Rich. Too rich. So that chocolate fondue for me is not my friend. I stay away from that.
I'll tell you though, on a regular basis, though, probably the thing that will, if I overdo too much, that makes me really feel terrible is pizza. Like I love pizza. I could eat 2 pies easily, but you know what? The cheese, I don't digest the cheese well, so if I could eat 1 or 2 slices. If I go like and have a whole pie, which easily I can knock off, I'll be in agony because probably the lactose and I just feel like my eyes swell shut from the dairy. I don't know what it is. I feel terrible on pizza, you know.
Yeah, I remember because 2 times ago when I came down there to see you, you guys were sometimes you'd get Domino's. You were getting Domino's at the house. Couple pieces a night. Yeah, I remember that.
Like I said, I could eat 1 or 2 pieces, but if I eat more than that, I feel disgusting. So.
Yep, I got you. Well, another question I have for you is, obviously, you appreciate how hard it is to get really big you need to lift heavy weights to get really big. You've talked about that over the years. So my question for you is, did the majority of the gains you make, did you do that all on your own, or were there years where you had a partner and then you noticed that's where you made the majority of the gains in the gym? Yeah,
that's a good question. I had a training partner for those growth years. So from 92, I would say around there, maybe like 1993 to like 1996 or 7, probably 6, probably about 3 good years. I trained with with a guy by the name of Doug Wentz, who I just interviewed actually on live with recently. And we also had another training partner, Tony Campagna, at the gym. And if it wasn't for those guys, you know, pushing, I don't think I would have been as big as I gotten because they took me out of that comfort zone. Like I thought 225 was a lot on the bench. And then Doug was like, all right, let's put another 25 on each side. I'm like, what do you mean? Let's put another 20, let's go up to 3 plates. And I was like, I had never done more than 2 plates. And so, but I was strong enough to do it, but I didn't, it's an uncomfortable thing to go that heavy. It's very traumatic on your nervous system. It's a little scary. So you have to really trust your training partner. So there's no way I could have lifted that heavy if I didn't have guys that I knew that could handle the weight and pull it off me. Likewise, get under a 600-pound squat, walk back on the bar. There's not many people I trust to spot me on a 600-pound squat. When I did 700 pounds for 2 reps, my friend Vinny Hanzik, may he rest in peace, he was like a 340-pound like powerlifting guy. Even the training partners that I had, I wouldn't have gotten under that weight without those guys. I knew he could have squatted that weight up, so he was not letting me fall. I wasn't going down to the ground with that weight because I knew I would get mangled with that stuff. So it is a scary thing, and you know what? It would weigh heavily on my brain every day. I would wake up and I knew I got to go do legs or I got to do back or I got to do chest, because I knew that the weight was going to be so much and so hard on my body and nervous system that a lot of times I couldn't even sleep that night after training, even if I trained early in the morning, because it would traumatize my nervous system. So it's going into a zone of discomfort. And I don't think a lot of people go there. They don't want to go there, and they don't get pushed there. And that's another reason why I think a lot of people don't make the gains that they make. Now, there are people that don't need to go heavy and just grow. Vince Taylor, it comes to mind, Paul Dillette, but most people don't have that crazy genetic potential, you know.
Yeah, even as you talk about, I feel like Dexter Jackson doesn't have to go really heavy to do what he. Yeah, no, that's.
But most normal people need to lift that heavy if they want to get huge. If they don't want to get huge, then you don't have to go that heavy. But I want to be the biggest guy, so I knew I had to be always challenging my body, and the only way you can do that is with a training partner, because it's like almost like you're making a pact. Okay, guys, we're not going to let anyone falter. It's every man is moving forward here, even if we all don't lift the same weights. We knew what our weight limits were, so we were always pushing. All right, you did 3 plates last time. You're doing 3.5 now. Oh, I don't know if I want to. You know, no one wants to go that heavy. You know, except there's always one psychopath in the group that's fine. But you know, I don't want to go that heavy. But you know what? I knew that I needed to go there. You know, in my wildest dreams, that I never believed that I would bench press 405 on an incline for reps. I didn't think it was possible, in the realm of possibility, because I wasn't a good bench presser when I first started. I wasn't just a naturally strong guy. I got stronger as I got bigger, and I got bigger because I got stronger.
Yep. No, and I second that for people that are listening, because my experience is the exact same thing. The majority of my gains came over a 2-year period when I trained with a guy who was almost twice as strong with me. I mean, he did 225 skull crushers. People don't think stuff's possible. Just him, the weight was a workout, you know? So you want to get really big, it's actually better to train with people that might be stronger than you. They might be half your size, but somehow they're stronger than you. It happens. A question that, when you mentioned the leg training, that I just thought of, I didn't even plan to ask is, I have some memories of sometimes where my legs would cramp so much after a hard workout, I couldn't get off the floor. And I had to get dragged from one room into the other once to watch the Super Bowl. So you have a story like that where your legs locked up so much or something that you couldn't move?
At one point, and I don't know if it was from, my theory was it was from whenever I would do IGF-1 for some reason, I would have like severe cramping problems, especially toward the end of my leg workout, where when I would get to hamstring curls and my legs would be locking up on me. And I found that if I drank a Gatorade or something with like salt in it and a little sugar in it, it seemed to counteract that effect and allowed me to get through my workout without that happening. So I don't know if my theory was that IGF kind of messes with electrolytes in some capacity. So so that would happen. A lot of times what would happen is that, you know, like I said, when I would do heavy legs, my nervous system would be so shot that I actually would feel like shell shocked, like I was in a war or something like that. And that's normal, because think about it, the nervous system controls the muscles. So when you have that kind of weight on your back, it's not the actual squat that's doing it, it's the compression of all that weight on your entire body. Your nervous system goes into like a freaking panic overload type of situation. And that's why rest is so important. How could you do another leg workout in 3 days after something like that? That's why if you give 100% to your leg workouts, or to any of your body part workouts, you shouldn't want to train that body part more than once a week. I wasn't ready mentally to train a body part a second time a week. I don't know how guys do the doubles, where they do each body part twice a week. Only a guy like Ronnie Coleman can truly recover from that, because he's a genetic freak, but most people cannot recover from that type of assault on your body doing it twice a week.
Yep. All right. Another one I have for you here is, I've always pondered this, because I can't recall if I've ever asked you this, is, you know, back in the day when testosterone first came out and you get pharmaceutical stuff, it's, you know, Deca's 200 or testosterone's 250. And then as underground stuff developed more and more, it became testosterone 500. And now I see trend 200 milligrams. Do you feel it's unnatural and traumatizing to the muscle fibers to be injecting stuff that's so potent and dense?
I mean, if you think about it though, Anthony, I mean, milligrammage wise, I mean, 100 milligrams is almost like you couldn't even see the powder on the table if we put it on there. It's a very small amount of powder. Now, I think what happens is they have to use more of the solubilization reagent to get the stuff into solution the more you put into it. So if you have a higher milligrammage in a smaller amount, in other words, instead of 200 milligrams, you go to 400 milligrams per ml, you got to use more of the stuff that causes it to solubilize and go into solution. So I think people get like when they get like soreness from injections, like of Test 400, I think it's because I don't even necessarily know if it's from the drugs. I think it's actually from the solubilization and the benzyl alcohol aspect of it. So I think the reason why the drug companies made the milligrammages the way they did was because they found that that was the perfect. We can go this high, but if we go too much higher, we're going to have people have discomfort on injection, so we'll keep it at this level. If you remember, Decadurabolin from American pharmacies would come in a bottle. It was 2 mLs, and the whole bottle was 200 milligrams usually. So, and actually Organon made a version for Mexico that was only 50 milligrams. So, these drugs were not meant to take a lot of them. No one envisioned that bodybuilders would be using these necessarily, but the reason they put the milligrammage the way they did was because they found that created the easy blending ability of the stuff. And remember, it didn't hurt on injection. And that's a key, because if people have to take a shot of something and they get really sore, the compliance level is going to go down the tube. So I don't necessarily know if there's a benefit necessarily to putting more milligrammage in less cc's. Now, for people buying the stuff, they feel they're getting more for their money, obviously, but sometimes more is not better. I mean, could you put theoretically a gram in 1 ml? You probably could, but I don't know what I never made my own gear, so I don't know what the technical difficulties would be and what the side effects might be in terms of the pain on injection site.
Gotcha. And within the same topic, within injection site talk, I've always kind of pondered this. I never thought about it, and I don't even think we ever discussed this until right now, but in all the years when I was competing and using everything, I never injected my glutes in my whole life. So mainly because I couldn't reach them. And do you think that contributed to me having clean striations through my glutes because I never used them like that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I had very big glutes, so I didn't do a lot of glute injections, but when I put a shot in my glutes, they dissipated. A lot of people have no glute muscles, very small glute muscles. They put everything in there, they get these big lumps in there, and that doesn't look really kind of cool. I think that the idea, if you're doing a lot of shots, is to move them around. To me, the lats, towards I would say the second half of my career, I did a lot of lat injections because I found that it soaked up the stuff really well. Even if it got a little bit of swelling there, it kind of just looked like you had a bigger lat. It didn't look fake or anything like that. I mean, obviously some people can go overboard with anything they do, but the lats were good. Delts are good too if you don't overdo those. A lot of guys overdo them and they get scar tissue and they get infections in there. So the key is to move it around. Obviously, I don't believe in quad injections. I just think there's too much risk with all the nerves in there, and people just have nightmare scenarios with that. Never, I would stay away from calves with regular gear as well because of that same reason. And certain arm injections are pretty good, but a lot of guys use site injection oils in their arms. So usually I tell people delts, lats, and glutes are usually I think because they're big muscle groups, and it's hard to kind of mess that up. If you use a nice long needle and you get it in deep, the absorption should be pretty good.
Yep. Yeah, I not that I regret it at this point, but I relied mostly on I used my calves a lot once I got comfortable.
Oh, really? Well, you have big calves, so.
Yeah. I used the calves a lot, and I would use them a lot actually the weeks of the show. That way, if something was blurred out, I wasn't too worried about my calves being blurred out. But I did use my quads a good chunk, which now I think when I look at my quads, I feel like the scar tissue helped diminish a lot of my natural separation through the quads.
Yeah, it definitely could. The reason I don't like calf injections, I'll tell you why, is because most people have compromised circulation, especially if you're over 250 pounds in your lower legs. And I'm the kind of guy that I don't know why, if it's just genetic. If I would, like back in the day, if I would like bang my shin, and you know how like you walk around the gym, you nail your shin on like the seated row machine or something like that. If I would cut my leg, it would a lot of times turn into an infection, and then it would stagnate because and I would get like I'd have to go on antibiotics actually just from scraping my leg. So if you take shots in your calves, and you get a lot of times people get a lot of fluid retention in their ankles because of that. And it makes it worse. And then if you have stagnation there, that can lead to infection. So I kind of tell people to stay away from that in terms of injections. Now, a lot of guys will use site injections in their calves, but that's okay because there's really no drug that's irritating the area there. It's kind of just like an oil. So, I mean, once again, I would keep the steroid injections above the knee.
Got it. We're going to segue from site injections to a food question. We're going to go back towards food for a moment. So I started using your mac oil like right when you first came out with it. And back then, not that there's a lot of mac oil out there, but there was no other mac oil.
Yeah.
Like you were like the first guy doing the low carb and the mac oil. So my question is because I haven't looked up recipes in a while, I used to always do your macadamia nut chicken, and I always used to put it with the vanilla peanut butter, isolized. But and I think you started using it with popcorn later on, but are there other things over the last 10 years since I looked it up that you've discovered other uses with the mac oil that you like to use it with?
I probably go through a bottle a week myself. I'm telling you, my cholesterol levels are so good since I've been using mac oil. And I used extra virgin olive oil before that, but as we know, most of the extra virgin olive oil on the market is completely fake. They have soybean oil in there, or you can't cook with it anyway because it burns. So, and I like the taste of mac oil a lot better as well. Mr. G, my good friend, George Smalley, makes a Jumbo Palumbo cookie now. It's not my cookie, but he makes them. And he uses mac oil in them. They're delicious. It adds a level of moisture to the cookies that are perfect. And once again, you can cook with it, no problem, so it doesn't lose its health benefits.
Is it a recipe? How would you get them?
You can go to mrpotsprotein.net, and he sells them on there. He actually just launched, the original cookie was the Jumbo Palumbo cookie. It was like a big mass cookie. And then now he's making Jumbo Lights, which are like not quite as many calories. The good thing about what he does with the cookie is that, and I was just talking to him about it on the After Hours TV show, is that the only ingredients in there are literally isolized whey isolate, my vanilla protein. He uses grass-fed butter, omega-3 eggs, flour, and just cane sugar. So it's all natural ingredients, and most of those ingredients are really healthy ingredients, and they probably cost them a lot more to use those high-end ingredients. And the mac oil and obviously the omega-3 eggs, you'll get some nice, good essential fatty acids, some monounsaturated fats, and then of course you get some of your saturated fats from the whole egg. So it's almost like the perfect blend of every fat that you could possibly need in one cookie. So I like that. I've made my own cookies with them as well. I'm kind of a little lazier lately just because I'm so busy, but every day I cook my eggs in the morning with the mac oil, and then at night I make, usually I buy in Sam's Club, I buy frozen wild-caught salmon. It's like in vacuum-packed sealed bags. I put mac oil, I coat the bottom of the pan with it, I throw that in there frozen, and I cook it. After it's done, and I put it on my plate, and whatever else I make with it, I usually saute some vegetables in there as well while I'm cooking it. I'll put some salad greens or some kale, and then I'll pour more mac oil. So I probably have at least 4 tablespoons of mac oil at night, and I probably have a tablespoon or 2 in the morning. So, and once again, I feel like it really stimulates my metabolic rate. My cholesterol profiles and my lipids come back perfect on blood work. And for me, I think it could be used on anything. Like you said, I'll pop popcorn for the kids using mac oil in a pan, and I'll just throw a handful of like popcorn kernels in there and pop it right literally in a frying pan with a lid on it. You could do anything. It's all purpose, and it has a buttery taste, so it hides everything. I'll put it in my protein shakes. At night, a lot of times I'll use a protolyzed pudding, and I'll make it as a shake. I'll put a tablespoon of macadamia nut oil in there, and I'll mix it in there. Even if you make it as a pudding and mix it in there, it adds like a little bit more creaminess to it. So it really, people haven't used, a lot of people do use it now. We sell, it's funny, when I first came out with it, people were like, you're never going to sell this, because I had to buy a lot of it. You have to buy like 10,000 bottles of the stuff. I remember the guy who worked with me, he's like, you're never going to get rid of all this stuff. I said, I'll get rid of it, believe me. And the first couple loads, I think the first load took me 3 years to get rid of 10,000 bottles, or 8,000 bottles it was. The second load, it took another 2.5 years. Now, my wife orders it every 6 months. We can't keep it in stock because people understand that it's the perfect bodybuilding oil because it's good for growing muscles. It's good, you can diet on it, and it's healthy. So you're getting like the 3 benefits out of it.
Gotcha. It's interesting because you mentioned the popcorn with the kids, and that's actually my next question for you is, there's actually a 2-part question to it. Do you feel like, especially with you having the kids now as they start getting bigger, when I look at like bodybuilding physiques, I feel like some of the times the people that had the biggest calves are people that played soccer, and the people that have the biggest shoulders and arms are the people that did gymnastics earlier in their life. So my first question is there a part of you that wonders, in theory, if things like arms can handle a good amount of volume because gymnasts are using them all the time and they have huge arms? And on top of that, with your kids, are there certain sports that you maybe want to have them do based on how you feel it like helps them structurally as they mature?
Right. If you would have seen my physique in high school and I would have done gymnastics, you would have thought I was huge because I was ripped. Because I had very good metabolism, but I wasn't. I was 160 pounds, 155 pounds. But if you were watching me on TV doing gymnastics, you would think I was huge because, if you're very lean, it shows off more. So I don't think these gymnasts are really that big. They look big because they're so lean and they have nice physiques. But if you put them on a men's physique stage, they would be the smallest guys up there. So I think it's deceptive. I think, when you're exercising constantly every day, doing those kind of pressing in strength moves, of course you're going to build definition. And a lot of these guys are genetic freaks anyway. That's why they're at the elite level of gymnastics. Not every guy looks like that, So I don't necessarily know if that's true, but I think that when you subject your body to doing something repetitively for long periods of time as a child, I think what happens is not that you get hypertrophy to the muscles. I think you produce more muscle fibers. It's almost like you cause a hyperplasia effect to occur. And I was convinced of that with running too. I think even though I would run 10 miles a day for 5 years straight, essentially, or 4.5 years straight, it's not going to make you get bigger. I was small and skinny, but I think what it was doing it was making my body, in order for my body to compensate and repair itself, I was producing new muscle fibers that I didn't know I had. And then when I started bodybuilding, all those new fibers, I had better genetics than everyone because I had been causing my body to have this hyperplasia response in order to repair all the damage I was doing. Because remember, the more mitochondria, the more nuclei you have, the better you're gonna perform in terms of energy production. When I'm running and I'm demanding that my cells, oxidize fats and burn carbohydrates, you don't need big cells, but you need a lot of mitochondria. And if you're going to have more mitochondria, you need more cells. So I was producing new cells, they just weren't big. Then I made them big from bodybuilding. So same thing with the gymnastics. I think these guys have more cells up here to be able to compensate for a 6-hour workout. And so when they go to bodybuilding after that, they have like almost like a genetic advantage over people.
That makes sense. And so with that, with your, because I think the same thing. I actually feel a lot of what gave me kind of a head start where I grew faster was because, not that I was lifting, I never bench pressed or anything until I was like 16, but I actively lifted little dumbbells and the stuff as I was entering puberty. Yeah. And I feel like as the body was growing, it was kind of laying the tracks for what was to come. Yeah. And so with your kids, are there certain sports that you're going to have them do or maybe want to do for health?
My wife probably would not agree with this, but I would love to see my son play football because I never did. I think my parents kept me, my father was a football fanatic. I think they kept me out of it because I had an eye injury when I was a kid on my left eye, get hit with a rock, so I really only saw out of my right. I think they were afraid I was going to damage my right eye somehow and I'd be blind my whole life. So I think they steered me into soccer more because they felt it was less risk. But I'd love to see him. If he wants to play football, I'd love to see him do it just because I want to see it, just because I knew that I would have been good. More than likely, I think for young kids, soccer is a good first sport. It teaches them, coordination with their feet and stuff like that, and it's kind of something that everyone can do, type of thing. I was a very good soccer player as a kid. I mean, I was probably the best kid on the team most of the time, and I always played with the older kids. So I would like to see how he does if he's interested. You want to see your kids do something, but then again, maybe they don't have interest in that. So my father was always like, you do what you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do because then you'll resent me later in life. So I'll be that way with my kids. I'll try to steer them in direction. I think I'd love to see my son play baseball. I never played that because I was always playing soccer. So I think it'll be interesting to see what he excels at. Now, my wife was an awesome gymnast. So I already see he's doing flips in the pool and stuff like that. Now, the chances that, he's not going to be a gymnast, obviously, but just to have that ability, he got the best from hopefully both my wife and I, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do athletically. Because I was very bow-legged and pigeon-toed when I'm still that way, and I had big feet, so I used to trip over. I was very awkward when I first started, but I was such a good athlete that I compensated for that. My son doesn't have that disadvantage. His feet are normal, and so like I said, my wife straightened him out because I was crooked. And so that's the wonder of having kids, because you can see like where they can take what you had genetically and then maybe go even beyond you with that. And so it's fun. You know, he's only 4.5 years old, so he's not at that point where he's actually going to be playing organized sports. But once he gets to that point, I know I'm going to have to control myself because I'm going to be one of those fathers that wants to get involved, but that probably should just stay on the sideline and keep his mouth shut because, you know, because I'll want to take over, you know, type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's going to be hard for you just to kind of sit silent.
Yeah, because I'm going to think I know everything. Hopefully, he'll take my advice as far as nutrition, and I'll be able to give him good vitamins and stuff like that. Because I never had that as a kid. I didn't know I just ate whatever. They didn't know how to eat back in the 70s and 80s. So, you know, even though my kids do eat I don't prevent them from eating junk food if they want it. Hopefully, I can at least make sure they're getting, you know, enough protein. Like my son, he drinks protein shakes, and he'll drink our Amino Evolved thing. So he's getting way more protein than I got as a kid. And I think even if I could sneak it in that way and still let him have his junk food if he wants, because he's not really an overeater anyway, I think he'll have a tremendous advantage over these other kids, you know.
All right, one final question for you here is it's about front deltoids. So, you know, as we all, I hope you and I realize, hopefully other people understand, when you're working out, for the most part, when you're training your upper body, your front deltoids are getting activated. And, you know, I had great shoulder development. You had great shoulder development. And honestly, I always was very conservative. I didn't want to overtrain the shoulders because I recognized they were actually just three little muscles, even on a big person. So were you ever, and you've had shoulder injuries over the years, so what's your thoughts on how easy it is to overtrain shoulders? And maybe, because I feel like I see people training their front delts a lot, and I just say to myself, do you really need that much training? So what's your thoughts on shoulders and overtraining?
Yeah. You know, you have very wide clavicles. You're just broad genetically. And then you had good delts on top of that, which made you look really wide and gave you good V taper. I'm a little narrow clavicle-wise. Even though I was one of the biggest guys, I didn't have wide clavicles, so I had to overcompensate with a lot of mass on my shoulders. Once again, I go back to you got to lift heavy weights to have, you know, big muscles. So I was back then we would all shoulder press behind the neck. That was and you get great development from doing that. Don't get me wrong. It's a very dangerous position to put your shoulder girdle in, and it probably led to some of my, you know, my shoulder degeneration over the years. But I was pressing behind the neck 315 for 6 reps. I mean, if you can do that, you're going to have big delts. There's no doubt about that. And then, you know, side laterals, I think is the best exercise for shoulder development, especially if you get on a side lateral machine and you just really isolate and really squeeze. If you do that, you're going to develop. You're not just training the side head of your delt when you're doing a side lateral. You're always working that front delt anyway. Likewise, when you're bench pressing, you could have the greatest form of all time. You think you're not using some front delt? Of course you are. So you're right, the front delts get a lot of stimulation. The key is don't do too many sets where you're going to overwork it. And that was something that I never did. I never was well, maybe initially my early part of my career, but once I got to that point where I understood how to stimulate the muscle, I understood you couldn't be in the gym for 3 hours training a body part and expect it to grow and recover. And I was I was one of those guys that I overtrained really easily. So for me, less is way better. So if I can lift the same weight in a quarter of the number of sets that you know most people do, I'm going to grow better from that. Maybe not everyone. So if let's say some guys do 20 sets for shoulders, which I think is way too much, I could do 10 sets for shoulders and get way more benefits out of that because I wouldn't be overtraining. I'll be able to recover better, and I'm still lifting just as heavy weights. I'm just not doing as much volume, and that's when I realized that was the magic thing that went off in my mind, and that's how I learned how to grow finally. Because when I was doing the conventional 80s workouts where you're in the gym for 2.5 hours, you know, doing 25 sets per body part, I didn't grow from that at all.
Yep. No, I'll piggyback on you with that because my shoulder, we never really talked about it too much. I always took your advice with the machine. You were even, when you were training me, you were always very, love that machine where basically you could play and I would do one side at a time. You could, you know, really partially do portions of it. I really enjoyed that, but I agree because I had good shoulder development, and the two things I really did, I was really strong with shoulders. So I could do, the most I did is, and there's people that have seen me do this, I could do 415 military press for 6.
Wow, crazy.
That was really good, and I could also do 90-pound side laterals. Obviously, there was a little bit of swaying,
but
I
still
learned
pretty good.
Johnny Jackson, I saw do it in magazines, and I went, well, that's obviously possible. Trained my wrists. I remember I was working the Species booth at the Arnold, and I couldn't shake people's hand because that kind of weight when you're twisting, your wrists get ripped apart. So I miscalculated that. But yeah, if you're going heavy, the shoulders don't need they don't need that much extra work for sure. So that's all I had for questions, Dave, for today. And I'm happy I got to do this interview and we could switch it up. So do you have any final thoughts for everybody?
No, I think this is good, and I think if we do this on a regular basis, people can even submit questions to you if they want to ask me, and it's kind of like Ask Dave, but not really, because it's kind of autobiographical. So I can bring in, I can bring in stories from my past and my experience as I grew, as I came up, because a lot of people don't know, because let's face it. The first 5 years of my career is when I made the best gains, and that's when there was no documentation of all this stuff. There was no photos, there was no iPhones, there was nothing. It was just go to the gym and train. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, they left a message on your voicemail at home, and when you got home, you got your answering machine and you got your messages. So there was no distractions. So I have to, the only way people can know what I was doing then would be to actually, for me to go back through my memory banks and try to pull out stories. And there's a lot of stories there about different methodologies that I use, at least, to put on the size that I did. And I was learning along the way. A big influence obviously was Dorian Yates in my training style. I didn't quite go to the extreme he went to in terms of so few sets, but I definitely cut my volume back a lot after reading his articles, reading his book, Blood and Guts, reading Mike Mentzer's stuff. It made sense, it resonated with me, but I also knew that the extreme was not the answer. So Mentzer went to the extreme, but you could do one set, 2 different exercises and leave the gym. And I knew that was never going to be enough for me to stimulate the muscle to grow. But I also knew that doing 4 sets per body part times 6 different exercises was way too much. And so in that respect, I learned, about moderation, and that's something I didn't know before that. Because when I first started, I came from a running background, like I told you. I would run 10 miles a day every day, never take a day off, completely overtraining all the time. And that's most runners like that, okay? But for bodybuilding, that's not what it's about. It's like a contained ferocity. You have to actually be super aggressive, and you have to attack the gym, but in a very, very calculated way. And if you don't, you overdo it and you don't make progress. So there's 2 extremes. There's not enough and there's too much. And most of the times people are on those situations, they're never in the middle where they should be. Once you find your middle ground, which works for you, that's what the magic happens.
I do have one follow-up question for you, because I actually almost asked this earlier, and then when you mentioned Dorian, I'm going to ask, because obviously Dorian was doing his thing before someone like me, so I never saw him in real life. 2 questions. Obviously, he was a lot better than pictures come through. Was he, because obviously Phil looks amazing in pictures, would he beat Phil Heath, honestly, as someone that kind of seen people, is it closer than people would think? Was Dorian that much better than people realized, because it didn't come through on video and pictures?
In 1993, when he was at his best, I think he would have beat Phil Heath at Phil Heath's best. I think Phil had a prettier physique. He had a cartoonish physique, but Phil is not that wide. Dorian standing on stage is very impressive. He had a good V taper. His waist was not big. He had so much muscle in his body, and his conditioning was so grainy hard. I mean, let's face it, Dorian beat Levrone, Nasser, Flex Wheeler, Sean Ray. I mean, the best of the 90s, consistently. He never lost to those guys. A lot of those guys could have beaten, well, maybe a lot of them. A couple of them could have beat Phil Heath at his best. So Phil wouldn't have a chance against Dorian at his best. Now, when Dorian had a couple of years where he wasn't perfect, maybe Phil would have beaten him if he was at his best, just because he had a pretty physique and he's cartoonish. But Dorian was very, very impressive in person. You had to see him in person to understand. I mean, the guy was like a piece of granite on stage. And he probably could have come in bigger than he did, but he was always so preoccupied with being the most shredded guy on stage. His front lat spread is untouched, I think. Probably the back poses, too. Ronnie was a freak of nature just because his shapes were better. That's the battle I would have loved to see. I would have loved to see Dorian in 93, Dorian against like a 99 Ronnie, or even like a 2003 Ronnie when he was huge. I would have loved to see those battles. That would have been like a very hard show to judge, and you would never be able to judge it unless you saw them live on stage next to each other. So we could speculate all we want who would have been better, but until we would have seen that matchup, Dorian was also a master poser. He knew his body. He might have beat Ronnie just because of his professionalism. I don't know, but it would have been a dream matchup for sure.
Interesting, because I will say I didn't realize how much it really, you don't understand until you see certain people in real life. Like an easy real world example is when you see a Cedric McMillan is framed next to other big people, he's so much bigger than other people on stage. You have no idea. I've seen him make big guys look small, just his frame. It's like unreal.
I look terrible in pictures, by the way. Except for like if I do photo shoot pictures in the gym, I look great because that's my thing. Because I can put a tank top on, or I can position my body the way I need to. On stage shot, I look terrible. You had to. I'm another guy you got to see in person. That's why a lot of guys don't really understand. You talk to some of the guys I competed against and in person and saw me backstage at shows. They'll tell you, I was really, really crazy lean, and I had a ton of muscle on my body. It looks more impressive in person. I've seen guys who were out of shape, and I see pictures of them, and I'm like, oh, they look pretty damn good in those pictures. And I knew they were out of shape. Because some people photograph well, they have good lines, you can fake it and pictures don't tell the whole story. Even video doesn't tell the whole story. If you want to see a true freak of nature and you want to see him at his best, you got to see him in person. Go see Andreas Munzer in person. The guy was ridiculously shredded. Same thing with, even Ronnie in person is more impressive than in pictures. But white guys in person they lose something in pictures because we don't have the dark skin color to pick up all the tones and the reflections of light. That's why Dorian doesn't get credit, I think, where he really deserves, because he was unbelievable when you saw him in person. It was mind-boggling to wrap your head around what he brought muscle mass-wise and development and muscle maturity-wise. His back was and let me tell you something. Haney had a great back, probably the best in the business before Dorian. Dorian just blew his back away once he hit that 93 for him.
Yep, got it. Awesome. Thank you. That was good. That was great.
Well, we'll try to do this again. And Anthony, I appreciate you being the guest host for this week's edition of Live With. And why don't you take us out? It's your baby.
Oh, that's going to be it. Yeah, of course. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of RX Muscle Live. If you go on, you come up with questions, leave the comments, hit us up, and we'll see if we can work them in future episodes. So over and out.